Hello and welcome to my channel. This is my first video. Thank you for joining me as we cook. Today we'll be making spinach and peanut butter stew along with Kisra, which is kind of like a crepe. This recipe does call for 1 pound of beef. However, I'm skipping the beef because there's protein in the peanut butter, but I will link to all of the recipes below in the description box. The stew requires 2 bunches or 2 bags of spinach, 1/3 cup dry roasted unsalted peanuts, chicken broth. What I have is homemade, and I will post a video on that too. 2 onions minced, 2 tomatoes chopped, a sweet potato chopped, 2 garlics minced, or 2 cloves of garlic minced, and 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, and also sorghum flour for the Kisra. This recipe is from Sudan, which is in the northeast of Africa. It's the 3rd largest country in Africa, so let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the Kisra because it has to ferment. The recipe says to give it at least 12 hours. I'm going to give it about 24 to make sure it's good and fermented. It calls for 2 cups of sorghum flour, which is gluten-free, which is good because my mom and I are gluten intolerant. Okay, oh, and I forgot to say that you should always use glass when you ferment flour. That way it doesn't absorb the taste and the smell like it does if you use plastic. I couldn't find any information if it affects the fermentation process though. So we want to use 2 cups, looks good, and then 1.5 cups of water. And I'll go ahead and link the recipe in the description box. Mix it. It looks like it could use some more water because it's supposed to be a thin batter. That's better. Now cover it with the cheesecloth to help keep out debris, but the idea is that it still lets the wild yeast gather, and that's what will ferment it. You don't have to add store-bought yeast. So cover it with the cheesecloth and put it somewhere warm where it's out of the way. I'm just going to put mine on top of the cupboard, and we'll get back to it when it's time to cook it. To make the peanut butter paste, fill 1/3 of a cup and pour it in your food processor, the peanuts. You could probably also use natural peanut butter if you don't have a food processor. It's too dry and crumbly. I'll have to add some olive oil because it's supposed to be like a paste. Add some olive oil to the pan and let it get hot. If you're including beef, then sear the beef first before you add the onions. Then transfer it to a plate or another pot. you'll probably need to add more oil before you add the onions. And after you add the onions, cook them for about 3 minutes, or until they're starting to turn soft and a little brown. And make sure you turn the burner down too after it gets well and hot, so that you don't burn them. Then after they turn soft, add the garlic. And 1 tablespoon of tomato paste. And stir it for about 30 seconds. And at this point, if you are including beef, you would add the beef to the pan, add 3 cups of stock and 2 cups of water, then simmer it uncovered for about an hour or until the liquid reduces by 1/3. But because I don't have beef, I'm just going to use less stock, about 2.5 cups. And now add the sweet potato and cook it for about 15 minutes or until it's tender. And make sure you move the pan to the back on low so it doesn't burn. For the Kisra, we add another cup of sorghum flour. Add enough water for a thin batter. I had to add more water actually. So it looks good now. Now add some oil to a light pan, and I always start it on high until it gets hot, and then you can turn it down later. Everything I've seen for this says to use a scraper, like a small plastic scraper, but I don't have that. So I'm going to try using a spatula and just holding onto the flipping part instead of the handle. So when the pan is hot, take 1/3 of a cup and spread it. And this is my first time making Kisra. I think maybe I got too much water in it, or perhaps maybe too much oil. But you're supposed to cook it until the edges curl up and it gets a little brown. I just turned down the heat now. It looks like maybe it's ready. I'll try to do better with the next one. So let's try it again. I got it too thin at first, so I tried to add more flour. Like I said, this is my first time making it. So since it wasn't working in the front burner, I tried moving it to the back so that the heat was a little lower, hopefully a little more even. It'll cook better. And let's try again. And yeah, wow, actually that looks better. Right now I'm waiting for the edges to turn up, and for it to turn brown, not be quite so doughy. Again, I've never made this before. This is my first sad attempt. Okay, so they're starting to curl up a little. Okay, so in one motion, we're supposed to flip it off the pan. So my experiment with the spatula is not very good. Apparently you do need a small plastic like a scraper. But again, I don't have that, so I'm just making do. So let's go ahead and check on our stew to see if that it's ready. Oh yeah, that's nice and soft. So now we'll add the spinach. and cook it just until it's a little bit wilted, but probably about 5 minutes. And then we add the tomatoes. And the peanut butter paste. We give it a good stir. Put the lid on, and then wait for it to wilt. It's been about 5 minutes, so let's check on the stew. Looks nice and wilted, so we'll give it another good stir and turn it off. And in a few minutes, we'll test it out and see how it tastes. Okay. So now I'm gonna go ahead and try it. Since my Kisra expedition was such a failure, I just put all the little crumbled pieces at the bottom. I wound up adding that second bag of spinach to make sure there was enough food. And the recipe didn't call for this, but I added some whole peanuts just for crunch. So let's go ahead and try it. Okay. Not great. I think the Kisra would probably be better if it was properly cooked. Again, I will link to the recipe videos in my description box, and there's also a video I found on cooking Kisra, which is much better than my attempt. So go ahead and watch that too. I'll link it. I apologize to any Sudanese that might be watching for massacring their staple bread. I'm sure it's very good when it's properly cooked. But I just had fun watching this video. I mean, making this video. I've been trying out different African dishes for a while. This is just the first time I decided to make a video about it, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video, even if it just made you laugh. All right, so hopefully we'll see each other next time. Thank you. Bye.